How's it going? I'm Jesse. Yeah, I mostly do photo work now, but sometimes dabble in video work, and spent like half a year with Wes and Wilson Creek and all the people I can meet down there for this film. It definitely took off, it grew legs and took off on its own. As soon as I got down there, I had ideas before I got down there, and then the story took a different turn. So, and I'm very grateful for Wes and for Bruce and for Keith Behringer, who you'll see in the film, for their time and expertise in the region or the area. Yeah, you want to say?
The stories always take a different turn, don't they? When we start creating and collaborating, get together. And it was a real pleasure to work with Jesse. We got together kind of through the Student Support Services Program at App State, and a friend of mine turned me on to him when she found out what I was doing down on Wilson Creek and the goals that I had for this organization. And she said, "You've got to talk to this young man." And so we did. He was just the perfect fit for us to come up with what I think is a really artful and creative approach to making a short documentary that gives you the feeling of what Wilson Creek is all about. In 1978, I was the fledgling president of the NC State Outing Club, and so, you know, all the places like Mount Rogers and the Smokies, they were kind of old hat to us, and so I kind of started looking at topographical maps and found a place that's remote. And in 1978, it was even much more so remote than it is today, even though it's only about 12 miles down our back gravel road here. But we went down and had a trip, and you know, I was never really the same since. I was exposed to a wilderness area that was so beautiful and kind of, to me, looked untouched, that it just kept circling back around in my life year after year for really over the next 40 years. And it was probably a lot more dangerous area than we really realized at the time, because back then and even through the 80s and 90s, Wilson Creek was a place where a lot of people went that didn't want to be found. And so, you know, there were a lot of interesting cultural aspects of working in this area that I kind of uncovered over the next 20, 30 years, but still just as immersed in it as I ever have been. And we'll tell you a little bit about kind of what our organization is doing, which is called cleanwilsoncreek.org. I've got some fact sheets that Willard and Jen can help hand out after the film to tell you a little bit about what we've done since actually 2015 or so, and what we're planning to do over the next who knows, however long I can hold out. So I think that's good for now. Let's show the film, and you can see Jesse's work.
Do any of you all in the audience have any questions you'd like to pose to our filmmaker or conservationist here?
Well, first, you did a great job on it.
Thank you.
Have y'all got an annual budget? Do you have an idea of how much you'd need to accomplish various things that you have planned
Boy, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
on purpose?
Yeah. You know, we're a very bare bones grassroots organization that, first of all, let me say that Bruce Gray, it's important to acknowledge, and as long as I'm executive director of Clean Wilson Creek, I'll always talk about Bruce Gray, because from, you know, as I mentioned, we have woven in and out of Wilson Creek for many, many years, and knew Bruce and knew what was going on down there. From 2007 to 2018, he was the cleanup crew on Wilson Creek. There was no Caldwell County support. There was very little Forest Service support. There was almost no infrastructures other than 55-gallon barrels that he put out on Forest Service and North Carolina wildlife land. And he and his crew picked up trash once, twice, 3 times a week in that truck that has 300,000 miles on it, hauled it generally 6 miles upriver to 2 dumpsters at the Forest Service camp. And he did that for 10 years. Out of his own pocket, maybe people giving him $100 here and there. So when we took over that operation from Bruce with his graces, when I did in 2018, he was depressed, he was exhausted, he didn't know what else to do because the problem had grown monumental. And what I would suggest to all of you, if you're willing to, is to go Google a Clean Wilson Creek on YouTube. And there's an amateur video that my daughters and I made back in 2018 when we kind of inherited this from Bruce, to show you the scope of what was really, I think there's a few clips in there, but of trash. But I want you to really see the scope of what we took on in 2018. And you know, started building partnerships and started confronting people with this amateur video we made, not confronting in an aggressive, angry way, but shining the light on what was happening. And again, it was made by my daughters and I. And so that got the attention, as things always do, of a county government when things don't look so great and people are sharing it on Facebook and other venues. So that really was the opening salvo to get people aware. You know, the first thing to, in terms of how much does this all cost, generally, you know, gas money, garbage bag money, feeding volunteers, that kind of thing. Cost of actually us doing what we do is pretty minimal, but the long-term needs of truly protecting that river are going to incur a lot more costs, and that's what we're working on right now. We've got a, and this is not really public out there information yet, but we're working with a group of regional conservation organizations with ourselves that is working on a complete restoration of that facility that I was sitting in at the end of Jesse's film, and we're looking at hoping to create, with the Forest Service approval, a historical renovation of that site, which has got incredibly wonderful history. We're hoping to do that and create a conservation education and training center that all of our groups would collectively use to oversee and keep an eye on Wilson Creek. So the costs that are really needed are coming down the road soon. We get by pretty well with the limited volunteers that we have on the donation incomes, but growing that trust is becoming more and more important so that we can permanently protect this 15 miles of river. So budgetarily, you know, we're small change, like the old Tom Waits song. You know, we operate on about $20,000 to $30,000 a year. With we bought a pickup truck to replace Susie, Bruce's truck. We have trailers, we have trash cans, we are sponsored by the National Forest Service, so they provide us with a lot of equipment now, pickers and buckets and things like that. But you know, and we do also pay summer interns through App State Biology to come down and work with us and get hands-on conservation. They're called triple E majors, I think, environmental biology students, basically, to come down and get hands-on experience with us. And then they also do flora and fauna research down there. So we've had 4 interns for the last 3 years, and we'll have another round this year too. So again, our monetary needs, it's been a whole lot more lobbying for partnership for the county, through National Forest Service, through North Carolina Wildlife, networking with community resources, than it has actually the need to spend a lot of money. It's really more manpower. But the need to spend more money to permanently protect the area is on the horizon. I'll be glad to talk a little more about that. Yes?
So the 15 miles of river, is all of that accessible, and is all of that being littered? Or that this area that you showed with everybody swimming, is that?
Yeah, well, the gorge is a hard-hit area. So that's coming up from toward Morganton. That's going upriver from the road called Brown Mountain Beach, turns to gravel, and there's a very nice wedding venue and resort called Brown Mountain Beach Resort at the beginning of the downstream section. From that point upriver, about 3 to 5 miles is heavily used in the summer by masses of people. July 4th weekend, there may be 800 cars along that corridor. So it's just assaulted.
And it's public access?
Public access. I would say 80% of the user groups on these holiday weekends are Latino groups coming from as much as 3 hours away. So one of our big goals is to get in among those groups and educate them, to ask for their help and cooperation, to get trash off the river up to the roadside and in infrastructure. There were no dumpsters on the river at all in 2017. The only dumpsters were at this workstation where we filmed. Now we've got 7 dumpsters up along the corridor, thanks to Caldwell County, National Forest Service, North Carolina Wildlife. But you know, that took a lot of meetings in closed door rooms, and the threat to make more videos. So anyway, I've talked a lot.
I was gonna say the scenes that you did see during the summer with people packed, that was July 4th weekend of 2020, actually, like in the middle of the pandemic. And I have a lot more scenes of just packed vehicles in every spot you can put a vehicle, spots you shouldn't put a vehicle. But yeah, and that was another thing I wanted to get into in the film. I didn't address it, was the Latino population's like use of the area, and like yeah, I just feel like they need representation, like they're using this spot, and it's awesome that they're there, but there needs to be dialogue between the people who live in the area and the Latino population, because there's like misinformation happening between the two groups of like pointing fingers at at the Latino population as being the cause of why it's so trashy or there's so much litter, but it's not the case.
Yeah, there's definitely many equal opportunity litters and abusers in that area. From fish poaching, which is going on right now because of the stocking, to local companies dumping. Foothills Land Conservancy just acquired an additional 93 acres downstream of our lowest point that we've been working on. So we're now working to clean out a 40-year trash dump where landscaping, lawnmower tires have been dumped over the side. It's called Playmore Beach area. So we recovered 256 tires from that about 4 weeks ago to start cleaning that area to turn it into a recreational spot. And we had 30 people on the river that day working, and which is really honestly greatly exciting to see us recovering land that's been neglected and abused for that long. And it's going to be added to now, an oversight clean area that will continue to work. So there's a lot of really exciting things happening. And again, Wilson Creek is a mix of many different cultures. You've got, the Edgemont Fishing Club, which is an exclusive private fishing club up in Edgemont, who are also kind of on board with us now, all the way down to the Brown Mountain Beach Resort. And in between, there's all kinds of different user groups that love the river. Gravel bikers, mountain bikers, cross-country motorcycle tourists who come from called the Trans-America Trail from California. The trail goes right in front of Bruce's store. Kayakers, all over people are driving 3 and 4 hours to use Wilson Creek recreationally. We're trying to tap into that user group, most of whom those people tend to be much more environmentally conscientious. and gain support from them, and that's happening. And there's, like I said, many exciting things on the horizon with better conservation education, so that when people come into that corridor, they feel a need to be respectful more so than they do. And again, we don't use heavy-handed approaches, and we don't get angry and confront people. That's never going to work. We try to lead by example. We try to ask for cooperation. We try to educate positively without being condescending. And we've had really great results with getting cooperation from those Latino groups and other user groups, Hmong user groups, and folks like that. If you can communicate with them, most of them are very willing to do what needs to be done. There's really a small slice of the pie that are really abusive people that are malicious about littering, but they're there. But we can clean up after them. We're not really worried about them. One of the most exciting things, and then I'll let Jesse talk a little more, that has happened is we are partnering now with a group that, if you haven't heard about, you will hear about soon, called Latinos Aventureros de las Carolinas. And this group was started about 2 years ago by these two dynamic women, Sandra Aguirre and Vivianette Ortiz. Vivianette lives in Gastonia, Sandra lives in Morganton. They were disappointed because so few Latinos were out enjoying the outdoors, hiking and backcountry and things like that. So they started organizing Latino-based events to get people out in the woods and doing fun things and kayaking. And in 2 years, the organization has grown to over 1,500 members. And they are many strong leaders in the Latino community, business and professional people. We partnered with them starting about 1.5 years ago, and they've been involved in 5 or 6 cleanups with us. They were the ones that figured out how to get the tires out of the gorge by forming a fire brigade. And within 4 hours, we had 256 tires out of that gorge, where we had a small group of folks that typically work in Linville Gorge with debris cleanup, trying to rig up pulleys and systems to get the tires up. They were over there getting the tires up. And we got like 5 tires up with the pulley system. So they are involved with us parallel, along with a number of other conservation groups. Wild South, which does a lot of backcountry work in Linville Gorge. Kevin Massey and the Wild South organization is also sponsored by the Forest Service. And so we work closely with Wild South. We work closely with Latinos. We work very closely with Foothills Land Conservancy, and Northwest Mountain Bike Association is also on board with us. So we've really formed a tight-knit group of conservation-minded organizations that we're now pooling to move forward with this. So it's some really exciting stuff. Bruce, in his 10 years, we estimate removed over 50,000 pounds of trash. We, since 2019, have documented close to 52,000 pounds of trash and debris removed from the river. So that's how much is going out. And like I said, if you want to get a feel for that, please go back and watch that first video, even though it's kind of a crappy video. But we did our best. But it'll show you what the situation was and now where it's come. Yes, sir.
I wonder, has there been any connection with Trout Unlimited?
Yes. We've had a lot of support for them, some financial support, a lot of moral and group support. We do presentations for them. So they also are very involved in the ecology of the stream bed. And you can imagine with this much utilization, that's a big concern in the delayed harvest areas and in the wild trout areas, that erosion and those kinds of factors come into play. So yes, Trout Unlimited, we just did a presentation for the Winston-Salem group about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So they're becoming more and more aware of what we're doing on Wilson Creek.
Wes,
Yes.
thinking about Brown Mountain Beach as a young girl, and you say it's now a resort. Is it now privately owned, and is it involved in this project?
Brown Mountain Beach Resort is privately owned by the McDaniels family, Ron McDaniels and his daughter Kelsey and her husband Jeremy. took it over about 5 or 6 years ago and started a huge, ambitious job of turning it into a resort and very nice wedding venue. Kelsey was a former middle school biology teacher and is very conservation minded. So yes, they have given us space. They've helped us and supported us in many ways, and they're going to be part of the future going upstream, I can tell you, as the years ahead come by. So.
This is all wonderful, the work that's going on, and there's so much happening. I'm really curious though, since Jesse does have the mic right now, if you could talk a little bit about the filmmaking process and like your experience as a filmmaker. You alluded to like you're a photographer and you make some films. So
He's done some really cool stuff since this one.
Yeah, I was just taking a class at App State, and it was a video class. I kind of started filming like before the semester started in December 2018, and then came in 2019 filming, and then the pandemic happened, and that made it interesting, but I was able to still access Bruce and the river since it was pretty social distanced. But I don't think anyone was too concerned about it. But yeah, like originally it was like gonna be a series of vignettes of all the people that use the river, kayakers and bikers and Forest Service people that are working in the area. But it quickly changed when I started to see just the feeling of the people and the feeling of being there. Was different from all those like vignettes. So, and I don't think I completely finished the edit for the video until like a year later. I like left it at the wayside and was like, I think I need to finish this thing and get it out there. So, but yeah, it's been a wonderful process. But the process I didn't think about editing it was this process, the afterwards, the showing it, and to collaborate with Wes and talking about it and getting the word out. I think that's been like the best part of the whole video making process. Definitely makes it more worthwhile than just a video to watch.
yeah, that's upgrade from that cell phone video that Wes was talking about you made a couple years ago. So.
Yeah, and I had people like criticize the video that I made. I was like, there's not a lot of scenes of trash. Where's the heaps of trash? Yeah, and that was just sort of like, it's not that, it is important, but it was like for this story, for this little piece, it was like not as important to be distracted by the trash. You needed to be introduced to who these people were and what the area was. And I'm wondering how many people like go to Wilson Creek or are familiar with it. That's been like the biggest turnout is people that are interested in it already and that are familiar with it. So you are my audience, the people that are familiar with the area. And I hope that you learned something or knew that you didn't know. I think that was part of the process. I grew up in Caldwell County in Sawmills and Dudley Shoals, and I didn't know all this information. So I think that is an important piece of like showing local history and showing local things that like Wes and Bruce are doing at Wilson Creek. It's like the people in the county need to know these things. So that's part of my work mantra. I got like.
So that area is still prone to frequent flooding. I'm just curious how much of the trash is local day use versus stuff coming downriver from above the gorge when it floods?
There is some downstream debris in heavy flooding situations, but it's really not overwhelming. And honestly, in the last 5 years, we've made a huge impact on stream side trash. So, our first goal was to get the trash to the side of the road, even though they may not have any place to put it, but to bag it, and then soon after a weekend, get there and get it off the side of the road. Forest Service has stepped up and created a lot better system of helping us do that. So that enables us, that frees us up from going out on the waterfront, nitpicking trash and diapers and bottles, So then we're able to do more educational focus about, okay, how do we interact with these folks? And then again, getting groups like the Latinos involved to do that, which they have a much better ability to than we do, to go out on the waterfront and educate the user groups, things like that. But there is some flood trash, but it's pretty minimal. And honestly, even in the last 2 years, the heaviest rains, the flooding has recovered really quickly. And I think a lot of that has to do with the regrowth of the vegetative, environment along the riparian zone of the river is in much better shape than it was when Ritter left it. And, there's a great, very long, very badly done documentary that was done in the 1990s when they were trying to get the National Wild and Scenic River designation. It's one of the most historically informative things I've ever watched, but it's tough to watch. But they talk a lot about the work that went into getting the designation to Wild and Scenic River. But what I learned historically from that documentary was that there was a cotton mill that started after the sawmill got washed out, but it never really became functional. And the reason that the lumber company left was not because of the 1916 flood, although it did damage a lot. They left because there were no more trees. Yeah, and so Ritter moved the operation back to West Virginia. And then he, basically, as you all know about industry back in that area, it was very primitive, and he had a lot of federal lawsuits for peonism, or basically the company store thing where he abused workers. And so it was the old industrial, magnate type mentality back then. And when they were done with Mortimer, they were done, and the families were begging for more industry. Cotton mill tried, failed. A lot of interesting stuff there.
It's like the
There's
story
a
of
question
Western
in the
North
back.
Carolina.
My question is this movie available? Are you distributing it? Are you selling it? Are you getting it out to people or what?
It is currently on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. I don't know how you can share that information with everyone. But yeah, it's out there for free to watch.
Just look up Wild and Scenic on YouTube.
Jesse Barber.
Yeah, you should be. Yeah. You should be able to just look up Wild and Scenic and my name, Jesse Barber, and you should be able to see it.
Yeah, and if you look up acleanwilsoncreek.org, all of the videos we've made come up, and we've made some recent ones about the conservation partnerships. And the one thing I would say is the future of this river relies on these conservation partnerships. Not one organization is going to pull any of this off, because it was a very complex problem to address because of the multiple land jurisdictions. Private inholdings, Forest Service, North Carolina Wildlife, and trying to get all those folks to take responsibility for their, for the area and help was the biggest challenge to start with, because everybody was much better at blaming the other organization for not doing what they needed to do. Funny how that is. But we're in a different place now, which is good. Really good. It's exciting.
Collaboration is everything.
Yes.
Yeah, you got a question?
Do you have any problem with graffiti on rock outcrops?
Never.
Yes. Yes. We do. I spent 2 days repainting a bridge abutment up in Edgemont from about 3 years ago from huge gang graffiti. That's the only major incident we've had, but there's a lot of minor graffiti up and down. Wild South is the organization that helps us with the most with that, because they use it a lot on Brown Mountain, the Brown Mountain Overlook, and in Linville Gorge, and there's some local climbing areas that they clean graffiti off of. So they have a non-toxic kind of sandblasting equipment that doesn't put chemicals into the water, that they bring a generator in, and then we get a group together and we go down there. And sometimes they use toothbrushes and sand and scrubbers, metal scrubbers. But yeah, the graffiti problem is not just horrific on Wilson Creek, but it's there. Yes?
I just want to say thank you for making that video. I know it's a place I love, and it sounds like many people here love too. So awesome job with that. You made some good stylistic choices, and something that has really struck me was that dog walking out of the country store
Right.
underneath the water line, and I was curious how much effort went into getting that shot.
I opened the door for the dog, so he was a really good extra, you know. I thought that was a nice little detail, the little line on the door, and I was like, how do I let people help people wrap their minds around the level of the water during the 40s flood? So yeah, that was my attempt at that.
Well, I can say I definitely have a first-person perspective of it now. I did it before.
Thank you.
And yes, Jesse, there were some really nice stylistic moments you have in there, just some good quiet moments where you lingered on certain shots. Were there any filmmakers that you tried to emulate with that, or are you just feeling the footage you had?
Yeah, I definitely felt like a novice for most of it, for all of it really. But like the summer scenes that I did, I was impacted by this documentary called Vernon, Florida. It's on YouTube, and it's by a world-renowned director. It's made in the 70s, and it's just this little town in Florida, and he just turns his camera on and has a scene, and this person that's in it, and they're just doing whatever, there's this man showing off his fighting chickens, and then there's this hunter talking about hunting, I forgot, turkeys, and I was inspired by that. And so the summer scenes were a lot of that. I just kind of turned the camera on and just let it go. And the guy at the very end, I got to talk about that. The poet guy. I was walking up and down the road, getting scenes of the river and everything, and there's this guy walking with a stick, and I'm like, "Hey man, how you doing?" He's like, "What are you doing with the big camera?" And I was like, "I'm making a video." He's like, "Do you want to say anything about trash on Wilson Creek?" He's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Okay." So I walk away, do my thing, and I coming back, and he's standing there, and he's just like, "Well, we're gonna do this?" And I was like, "I guess so." And we're standing on the side of the dirt road, and I just turned my camera on, and I had just enough time to turn it on when he said, "Is this thing on?" And I was like, I laughed, and then he just started going, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I just stood there, and that whole poem, slam freestyle poem, was
That's awesome.
12 minutes long, and me just standing there wow, this is something else. So this has to go in the video. So that's part of the documentary process, is just being there.
And I appreciate y'all being here this evening, but unfortunately we're at time. And just want to give another big round of applause to our crew here. And I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that there's sign-up sheets, there's t-shirts for sale, there's a donation box for Clean Wilson Creek as well. So thank you all so much for being here.
Can I just say one more thing?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Before we dissipate? The talk was called At the Intersection of Art and the Environment. So one of the things I want to acknowledge is just how important the Blowing Rock community has been in my own motivation to carry through with what people told me was kind of an insane thing to take on. As a landscape painter who's been supported by people in Blowing Rock and this whole area for 40 years now, I kind of came to a personal crossroads of, I've really benefited a lot from being out in the woods and painting these scenes, and what do I do now with that? And a lot of that impetus came from being supported by people in the Blowing Rock community who purchase art, who love wild places, who want to protect wild places. And so really the next thing I decided was I can do this and combine the two and see what happens. So I started making the decals. That was the very first thing I did to sell for Bruce so he could get a little income. And because I made the decals, one day he said, Wes, how about taking this over and doing something with it? So that was the next step. And I still had 3 years before retirement, but I decided to do it. And again, a lot of that energy comes from being supported by so many people up here. Tim, who's in the audience here, is my gallery owner, who's made a whole lot of contributions to my art career in many, many ways, but also to Wilson Creek, the efforts. And other people in this community have done that as well. So I just want to acknowledge that Brahm has certainly played a role in my inspiration to take care of what is right on our back doorstep. Again, all you got to do is go to the back of this parking lot and drive straight downhill, and you're there. You might have to stop for a few wild turkey flocks.
And Jesse, is there anything you'd like to say, or any projects you're working on now?
No, I'm just trying to get more connected with the Latinos Aventureros group, getting to know them, trying to work on getting the word out about the stuff that they're doing. So, yeah. So thank you for all coming and seeing this. It's amazing. Yeah.